So what happens when you complete a project, use it for a while, and then toss it into storage and forget about it? Well, it becomes a project again. On today's episode of It Weren't Broke When I Parked It, this barn fresh Deere runs again. There's a surprising vacancy in the storage rack. So we yanked this thing out of storage, and it's back on the chopping block. Try and remember actually when it was laid up and parked. That was a few years back now. You know how it goes. You move something in the storage just temporarily. Next thing you know, it's been there for half a decade. And it has just been sitting up on a rack in storage ever since then. So the old cat mouse patrol looks to have been making the rounds. But this thing has a thorough coating of preservation dust on it. Now this old sled, this thing was a heck of a project and kind of a thrash to put it together in the first place. There was a whole lot of pieces that had to go together that were never meant to be. A lot of chopping and welding and smashing with a hammer. But eventually got it together, and as luck would have it, it actually turned out to be one of the more reliable sleds I've put together like that. It was legit registered for the trail, had taken it in some deep snow up north, went to some hill climbs with it on the snow and some grass drags. But trust me, that 2-inch lug track with no studs doesn't hook up too well. Pretty sure it even went on a poker run at one point. The one hill climb race we had this thing on was going up the hill, and there was a couple of whoops going up it. Well, the old trunk flap just swung open and we lost everything. It was a yard sale up the hill. There were screwdrivers and pickled eggs and pork rinds and belts just scattered about the hill. I found most of the stuff and was able to get it back. Now, with any true project, it wasn't really finished. There were some loose ends, things that didn't work, things that would like to improve. It just never happened. So I won't bore you with all the details of things that we have to fix, mainly because I don't even remember them at this point. We'll just go along at it and see what we run into. Everybody likes surprises. So the first order of business is going to be taking care of these skis. Now these plastic skis were one of the early attempts I had at converting a plastic modern ski over to leaf springs. And while it worked, they never really functioned great on that sled. Either due to suspension setups or definitely not driver error, these skis would tend to kind of dive down into the snow, and they didn't provide you a whole lot of flotation in the loose stuff. And the lack of a functioning front shock made the ride really bouncy, especially going up ski hills. You'd start bouncing and kind of walking left to right, and there was no damping at all. So we're going to have to improve that on the next round. It didn't help that the leaf spring rides directly on the plastic, so there's no friction there at all. It's really slippery. And the old clutch spring overloads, well, they didn't hold up the greatest either. So we're going to try and move from an old precision skis that I got cheap because a lot of people don't like the way that they handle, over to these slightly newer 02 to 05 Summit skis, which are cheap because people don't like the way that they handle. It's got this funky main keel here offset to the side, and all your extra flotation is out here. Now on the original sleds you'd think this would go to the outside, but no, this is supposed to go to the inside of the sled. I guess primarily if you're trying a side hill, it's easier to tip the sled up that way. We're probably going to try running these backwards to start off with because, well, who likes to follow the rules? Going to salvage and reuse that leaf spring. Pretty sure that was off an old Polaris TX. That's a good quality multi-thickness monoleaf. And was going to try and salvage some of the parts off of the old skis, but they're on those so well. Probably just leave these in the parts pile for another future project. Likely going to be the same configuration on here. See if we can't fit the front of the spring down underneath the ski loop and make a mounting bracket at the backside there to hold it. Now if we do this, your center point of the spindle is going to be a little bit behind the center point of the ski. Might have to adjust the carbides or well, probably adjust your driving style to try and make it work. Maybe we'll punch another hole in here up on the saddle. You do kind of want to keep that spindle centered with the middle of the ski there. Otherwise you get too much front out here and it wants to start catching and steering on its own. So right now, getting the leaf spring sort of mocked up in there. We had to grind some of the plastic ribs out of there to make space for the leaf spring. That's sort of mocked up where it's going to be. Back half is most likely just going to be a couple pieces of angle here, bolted through the ribs. One will get bolted through the back carbide, and maybe a couple other ones going straight down through the bottom of the ski there. Now the shock is probably going to sit here outboard of the leaf spring. Doesn't seem to be quite enough room to fit from up there in the middle up above the ski loop, so we're kind of going to move it out down to the side and figure out a bracket down there to mount this up. I don't know where those came from. I think they're off an old Blizzard or something, but they're still good enough. We had to clean up some stuff for the spring there, and this cross rib got chopped out, but left a little bit on each side here to act as a spacer and keep that spring centered. Close enough. It just occurred to me, this is the second project in a row that we're starting with the skis instead of figuring out if the engine even runs. One of the standard things is going to be going through the carburetors, making sure everything's clean there. Does have some old fuel in it, so hopefully we don't have to get too much into that, but we'll see. Aw man, who the heck would leave gas in this thing? Oil level in the rotary valve tank is still holding steady, so that's a good sign. If the seals were down there leaking in the engine, usually that drains out over time and just fills the entire bottom end of the motor with oil. There's a lot of interferences with pull starts and fuel lines rubbing on jack shafts. Might have to fix those. But one of the big things is an actual monetary investment that we made into this thing. Picked this up at the swap meet. It's a fast fat boy pipe, allegedly for a 93 Mach 1. I think I paid 25 or 30 bucks for it. Can't exactly remember, but there it is. Yeah, we're trying to sell stuff, buying more stuff. And since that stock pipe was starting to crack and fall apart anyways, why not upgrade? We'll see if it fits. And by that, I mean if it doesn't fit, we'll use the hammer until it does. Not a whole lot of difference side by side. Thought the fat boy would be a little bit wider. Stock pipe weighed 10 pounds 3 ounces. Well, that install was fairly drama free. The hood doesn't quite fit anymore. That's nothing the Sawzall can't take care of. Every time I park something and leave the belt on, you get all that corrosion that all needs cleaned off the next time you want to run something. Public service announcement, remove your belts. Another one of the ongoing issues was that the tachometer and the temperature gauge didn't work. And I wasn't quite sure if that was from the stator not putting out any power or just a wiring issue. And for some reason, there's not enough hookups here to actually go to the temperature gauge and the tachometer. Which is frustrating because all these parts came from the same sled, so I don't know why they don't go back together. But in the meantime, I picked up this mint condition tachometer from another sled that hopefully we can make work. Wow, that gear oil actually looks good. Not sure if you realize, but the level of hackery on this sled, I mean, it's just on another level. Even for my projects. Now I gotta say, one of the best things about having this sled, and some of the most fun I've had on it, was using it for its non-intended purposes. Initially you would think, long track, bigger engine, hey, it's all about the powder and the deep snow. Well, unfortunately, we don't often get the steep and deep out here, so you gotta use it for what you can. And just using this thing for cruising, or a little bit of trail riding, or heck, I've even used it for ice fishing, well, that's definitely not really the intended purpose of it, driving it obnoxiously loud overpowered and ill-handling sled for that type of stuff. But it sure is a lot of fun, and that's really what counts. Being able to take projects and use them beyond their original intended purpose, well, that gets you a whole lot more gratification. Currently also want to get into this clutch and change some of the ramps or springs, and well, we got to get the RPM falling off situation figured out here. We need to get this thing faster, so we got to get it tuned in right. And whoever put this thing together has the clutch bolt right in line with the bumper. The old access port here no longer lines up with anything, so we're going to somehow have to figure out how to get this clutch off of here without removing the whole engine. Well, if you don't have an all-access pass, you make one. Well, we conquered one problem, only to run into another. I don't know who the heck put this thing together. I'm sure a 3-foot pry bar and a 20-inch crescent wrench is all part of the standard skidoo removal process. Gonna need all the help we can get on this job. Finally got this thing out of there. Now we've just been definitely not using the hammer to try and get the splines disengaged here to get this outer portion off so we can check the ramps and maybe tweak some things. Now on a previously unaired episode of how we destroyed the clutch that bad, we performed some serious weight savings on that inner sheave there when we decided to machine this off when the chassis flexed a little bit too hard. Don't know if that was from going up the hill and jumping or the time I kind of hit a high wall a little bit too hard. But either way, we'll probably give this thing a fresh balance. So after consultation with a local TRA expert, we determined that a bigger hammer was the proper tool. Might go through the pile, see if there's some new secret clutch combo we can come up with. So right now we've got some 286 ramps in the clutch, and these are some 285s. Now these literally did come from the trash because, well, there was a clutch sitting by a garbage can, and of course I picked it up and threw it in my cart. And the ramps are still good, they just need cleaned up a little bit. But supposedly the 285 ramps will give a little bit higher RPM on the second half of the shift curve, which is kind of what I believe we need. Even though the tack hasn't been functioning at all, we're just going by ear at this point. Once again, be sure to consult your skidoo manual. Well, we got the spring out, and we'd like to find one just slightly higher on the upper side of it to have a little bit higher shift out RPM. But we're really limited on spring selection for these TRAs, so we're probably going back with the original. We'll throw in the rusty 285 ramps just to say we did something. Yep, still using that old motorcycle wheel balancer. Air filters are definitely filthy. Well, don't worry about that spot. Going through the carbs and some notes, trying to figure out where we're at. Well, the nice thing about non-ethanol fuel, even though it was kind of old and nasty and sitting in there for a few years, no corrosion. Just a little bit of grunge that some carb cleaner will take care of right quick. It's so nice to not see all that green algae in there. Out with the old. Now, as much as I would like to just throw some gas in here and roll, there's a disturbing amount of grunge. We're going to have to try and clean this tank. I forgot, the seat's only held on with one bolt. That was quick. Now, a bunch of debris and a little bit of rusty hose clamps. Well, as usual, things are escalating quickly. Now, while the seat's off, maybe we'll try and hook up the taillight. So initially thought, due to the cleanliness of the carburetors, that there was no ethanol gas stored in here. But after cleaning all that weird grunge out of there, and finding that the fuel line had completely rotted off inside the tank, I would say that there definitely was ethanol fuel in there. The whole pickup was completely rusted shut and filled with crud, along with the little pickup that was at the bottom of the tank. I can't believe how much damage was caused by that. We had to clean this up on the wire wheel and some Scotch-Brite. Now we might be using a new one on this project, but we're too cheap to throw away the old one. We'll let it sit in some carb cleaner or the ultrasonic cleaner, and eventually it'll get reused. Got the slightly tweaked carburetors back in there, the new clutch set up. Still got to go through the secondary there, and we're going to try and get everything else kind of taken care of up in this area before we put the fuel tank back in. We'll see what all we can scavenge off the parts sled. That's where that tack came from. Ooh, look at that fuel line. Well, looked new. Yeah, that primer line might still be good. Yeah, that's definitely good fuel line. Yeah, no joke, these old primers seem to last forever compared to the import stuff. Ooh. Good tether. Gotta be an old windshield in here somewhere. Yeah, that might be the spot. Well, time is quickly running out for this project. Going to be heading up north to Canada here in a couple of days, and this is nowhere near running. Was out looking through the parts sled, and I believe I found a reason why the tachometer wasn't working. Allegedly, you need this whole extra wiring harness here to actually hook the gauges up. Stole a wiring diagram online. And if you're wondering why the projects and pieces that we're working on seem to be bouncing around a lot, that's because we have project ADD. Once you think you've got one project all sorted out and it's going to be easy from there on, then you move on to the more difficult ones. Then you end up with about 5 different things all 3/4 of the way completed, but nothing really done yet. Working on cutting up some little brackets here that'll sit down in the pocket of the skis, be held captive by the ski loop bolt, and hopefully also mount the shock right here. So there's how it's going to sit. Shock outboard of the leaf spring. We got a couple of pieces of bracket there held in with the bolt through the ski loop, and then we put this bolt through the ski loop to make it fit. Miscalculated and thought that this bolt should be a 3/8. Turns out it should be 7/16, but too late now. We'll just make a bushing out of electrical tape on there. Well, second ski done. Far from perfect, but nearing completion. Well, you know, less bolts is more weight savings. But I'm waiting for some daylight to go out and finish welding these up tomorrow. Should have put some washers in there, but we'll just call that self-alignment. Quality control test. Custom fit bushings. Well, that took way too long, but finally got the upgraded plastic skis done. Ended up drilling the saddles a bit further forward to get it centered over the center of the carbides. Now, suspension wise, everything down here has been relatively problem free. Kind of might need to make some more adjustments on them front limiter straps to get the weight to transfer more. And we're not even going to look at those rails because I'm sure the holes are getting egged out. The old suspension rail splice is still hanging in there, even though everybody said that was going to break in like 5 miles. Part of the trick is when you make something like that, you got to make sure that the bolt holes are all very tightly spaced and there's no play at all in there. Got to hit up the part sled once again. So many wires. Well, that wiring harness, it got a little bit toasty. Well, it could have been a lot worse. We pretty clearly got the 2 melted wires. Even with all that electrical tape, they still couldn't keep it from burning. Now, the proper connection is always a wire nut. You can even throw some grease in there if you want to be fancy and protect against corrosion. Now, since this wire is shorter than the rest of the harness, you just do a figure-8 zip tie loop through the remaining harness so that you can't pull things apart. Now, I'm going to be honest. There's way too many wires and connectors on this thing. And apparently, that was not the end of the harness. It connects into all these other plugs here. That's why I couldn't get the tachometer to work. Well, 2 out of 3 connectors fit. At least it's the majority. So now we just got to securely stow all this wiring. Been recycling all the zip ties I cut off the snow flap. So this whole mess is just sort of jammed up underneath the cowl here. We're just going to assume it's all going to work perfect. It's coming down to the final stretch now, trying to get all the loose ends wrapped up. Well, most of the loose ends are just zip tied or forgotten about. Almost forgot, but we've got this mint condition windshield that we got to somehow scab on there. I don't exactly remember where this came from, but it actually might have been the original top portion of the windshield that was on there. It was a really tall one, and I cut it down. Doing some freehand cutting to sort of recontour this to keep that a nice low, sleek profile. Well, that's pretty hacked by even my standards. Well, we try to not drill into anything important. But yeah, just straight up pop riveted it on there. That's going to have to do for now. Alright, we finally got a headlight. It's not hooked up, but don't worry about the details. We massaged the hood a little bit, but it hopefully self-clearance. The tail light's also Bluetooth at the moment. So at this point we've got like 80 miles of wiring here, but the headlight connector is still up underneath the dash here and not up in the hood. So we've got to extend out the wiring harness again over to that brand new spiffy headlight. Now wiring's expensive, so I'm not going to use brand new stuff, but it did occur to me that looks suspiciously like a wall outlet. Might be able to make that work. And just like that, an old dehumidifier cord. Don't even need an adapter kit. Wow, is that a professional wiring job. Sealed up the holes in the pan. That about does it. Next step, throw some fuel in it. See if this thing still runs. And it better, because it's about to get loaded onto the trailer. But first, I'd like to tell you about an amazing new product that I've been using. Groil is your #1 friend when it comes to fighting rust. Other brands may claim to stop corrosion, but Groil Roundhouse kicks it in the face. And at a fraction of the price, Groil's got you covered, both your car and your clothes. So don't let road salt get the better of you. Get Groil. Click on the link below for a special discount. Well, we got it filled up with gas. Trying to revive the 6-year-old primer.
So you're
not getting any gas yet.
You're really gonna take this thing?
Yeah, I'm gonna take it. It's my ride.
When's the last time you started this?
About 7 years ago.
Oh, that's great. It doesn't run perfect.
That's nothing. It was running when it was parked. What are you talking about? This thing is a classic.
You think?
This is the model of reliability right here. I don't know if gas is supposed to come out down there. Well, we'll see what happens. Well, the primer's not working again. Alright, well, we got one that works. We'll just leave that as a security feature. Well, that was a thorough test run. Time to load it in the trailer. Going from the trailer to the trail. Going straight from the trailer to the trail. Alright, in between riding, we gotta try and crank them clickers up because we're not pulling the RPMs in the first half of the clutch travel that we need. So instead of putting a different spring in, which is the proper thing, we're just gonna try and mask it with the clicker settings. And might as well see how the plugs are running too.
Oh yeah.
Out on the snow, nothing runs like a Deere.
Well, after all that, right back where we started. The old skis held in there pretty well. Shock mounts are getting a little bit loose. Probably should have made that bracket a little bit more beefy, but that did the job. Weren't exactly snow crossing it, but definitely hit some bumps and moguls. The old SMV sign took some abuse. And we might have lost a few more lugs. Somebody vandalized the windshield and took off some of the speed dust. Cranking up them clickers 2 slots definitely brought the RPMs a bit, and that's definitely where it wanted to run. With a working tachometer, we could see we finally was breaking away from that 7,000 RPM range, and it was definitely up into the mid-7s, maybe even towards 8. Kind of hard to tell when you started getting at speed and bouncing around. I think the goal with the pipe was around 7,500 to 7,750, so we're right in that range. The motor's still all stock on the insides. Might have to change that. But overall, thing did pretty well, all things considered. Another fun fact about this sled is the engine is angled so far forward, and the angle that the carbs are also mounted at. You're not supposed to have Makunis that far forward. And due to that, we've readjusted the floats in there to get it as best as you can, but you cannot park this thing on a downhill slope. If you leave it on any type of a downward incline, it floods out and it's a pain to start. You only do that a couple of times before your left shoulder starts reminding you to park it on an uphill. Now the brakes must have froze up at some point because there was a bit of snow coming up through the hood there, and I needed to hit the brake here when I was putting it in the trailer, and well, the cable is no more. But that'll probably be a project for another day. About time to put the old girl up in storage and wait for the fall. Until next time, keep your standards low and your spirits high.